evaluation of our adversary in this case. The court is going to recognize that the department is once again present, represented by Mr. Mike Knight, joined by Ms. Veronica Briseño and Mr. Jesus Ortiz. In addition, we have Ms. Kathleen Savage here, having been appointed as the attorney for the respondent mother in the case, Zenaida Alvarado. Ms. Alvarado is present. In addition, Mr. William Asari is here, having been appointed to represent Mr. Alexander Zamora. Mr. Zamora is present. Mr. Richard Saldivar is here as the attorney for the respondent father in this case, Mr. Eric Alvarado. And I see that Mr. Alvarado is present. And in addition, we have Mr. Christopher Bunch here as the attorney and guardian ad litem for the attorney ad litem for the children, Mr. Vicente Barrera and Miss Marianne Featherston are here with Costa County and as the guardian ad litem. We were in the middle of the hearing and are continuing it today. I believe we concluded the last hearing with the Ms. Alvarado's testimony. Mr. Knight, are you prepared to continue presenting evidence on behalf of the department?
Yeah, the department is ready. There are some motions that have been filed. I don't know what the court's pleasure is on that.
Yes, I see that there's a motion to transfer venue. Let's see, what other motions do we need to?
Council has filed an invalidation of removal.
I don't, in reading that, let me ask Ms. Savage, did you file that or did Ms. Alvarado file that on her behalf? It did not have your signature to indicate it was your filing. It looked like it was a blended affidavit petition that she created and filed on her own. Is that what happened?
Yes, Your Honor, that was filed by Ms. Cortez.
All right, well, I recognize it's
Judge, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? All right, I think Mr. Barrera might be having some technical issues. So the motion to transfer venue is the only, I mean, I can recognize what Ms. Alvarado filed on her own, but I'm not going to take any action on it. We're going to proceed with the hearing. But as far as the motion to transfer venue, is that something that, okay, I'm going to mute you, Mr. Barrera. Well, Ms. Savage, do you wish to urge that now, or do you, what is your intent with that motion?
However the court sees fit, as far as, I know my client wants the 262 heard today, so it might be better to conclude that and then have the motion to transfer arguments heard. Because if we do the transfer and it's granted, it's gonna slow that down.
Yes, I mean, we're in the middle of a proceeding, and I'll just say there's no basis to transfer in the middle of a proceeding. And I think you can acknowledge that, right, Ms. Savage, that we've started this hearing, we've had multiple settings, and the children and everyone involved deserve to have a resolution. And so that I will recognize, I'm going to table it for now. I don't think it's the appropriate time to address that. I think we need to continue and finish this hearing. With that in mind, are there any other preliminary matters that need to be addressed?
Your Honor, the department's position on the motion is that it does not suffice under Rule 87 or Rule 257 of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for noting that. And we'll, if needed, we'll address that at a later time, but we're not going to address it right now. We're going to continue the hearing. And with that, Mr. Knight, do you want to designate who your next witness will be?
Your Honor, the rule has been invoked, and I don't know if we have anyone who is not a party that may be listening.
Yes, we may. Let's see, who are our potential witnesses here? We have Ms. Lopez with the department, Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Ortiz, and Ms. Briseno. I can't recall the last hearing. Who is the designated representative for the
Mr.
department?
Ortiz.
Mr. Ortiz? Okay, so who would your next witness be?
I will be calling Alex Zamora, Your Honor.
Okay,
We also have the placement who may be called.
all
Judge
right.
D, can you hear me? This is
Yes,
Barrera.
yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay.
real good. I just didn't see myself on the screen, so I was just
Yeah.
making sure.
It's off, it looks like, well, yes, I can see you, and we can see you and hear you. So I'm gonna just mute you for a second while we start our testimony with you said Mr. Zamora or Mr. Alvarado? I'm sorry, Mr. Knight.
It would be Alex Zamora, Your Honor.
And I just wanted to note before we start any further testimony that the representative for the tribe, Mr. Nature, is also not present. But as I understand it, he had notice and was aware of the proceedings today.
Yes, Your Honor.
Right.
Notice, and he responded that he would not be in attendance.
Okay, I just wanted to record that for the record before we get started. So Mr. Knight, put your hand down, and Mr. Knight, you may proceed.
Mr. Zamora, you're the father of the two youngest children, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How long have you and Miss Alvarado been together?
I mean, I've known her for 7 years, about 7 years.
Well, and how old is your oldest child with Miss Zamora, with Miss Alvarado?
She's 5.
Okay, so you've been together for, off and on at least 6 years. Is that a fair statement?
Sounds about right.
All righty, and just get a little background information. Are you employed or are you a student?
Both, actually.
Okay, and are you currently employed?
Yes.
And what's your job?
I'm a contractor at LNF, but I am currently in the onboarding process for Halliburton.
Okay, all right, that's good to hear. Now then, one of the reasons why we're here today is allegations of drug use, and basically, in reading your file, I mean, you've struggled with drug addiction off and on over the years. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
So you haven't been to the 12-step program?
I've been there a few times.
Okay, and was that just for social purposes?
I mean, I think there's a lot to learn there. I don't think if you go there, that means that you're on drugs.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever used drugs in the past?
Yeah, a long time ago.
And define a long time ago.
I'm not sure how many years it was. It's been multiple years.
Okay. Now then, in visiting with CPS, you described mom as a trigger. What did you mean by that?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that. All right. Miss Alvarado says that has accused you of engaging in family violence against her. Is that true or not true?
I don't believe that's true.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you believe it's safe for your children to be taken care of by someone that's using drugs?
No.
Is that why you called in reports to CPS over the years regarding the mother of your children?
No, I couldn't say that.
So why did you call in reports to CPS?
The last time I ever had contact with CPS, I actually called because I couldn't get a hold of Miss Alvarado. I actually even told them after we did have a communicate that I had no further concerns.
So you've never called CPS and told CPS that you felt that Miss Alvarado had relapsed and was using meth, crack, or any other illegal substance?
No, I never said that.
So when you told CPS that, were you lying?
I've never said that she uses crack or I don't know.
You've never told any CPS representative that she uses drugs.
I've never told any CPS that she uses crack.
So if CPS would testify to that, they would be lying. Is that a fact?
That's correct.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Zamora. You're testifying today that you've never called CPS regarding concerns over drug use by the mother of your children. And so are you lying now when you say you've never called, or were you lying when you called CPS to complain? Because that's one of the reasons why we're here today.
I'm not lying either time. And actually, the last time I called, I told CPS that I didn't have any concerns.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. We're not supposed to ask questions about who's calling the CPS. These are supposed to be anonymous calls, and they want to interrogate him about these calls that they're alleging he made. If he wants to ask him direct statements he's made to CPS workers, that's different. But to ask him about the calls and what those intakes were, I don't think is a testimony that should be admissible.
Mr. Knight, your response?
Response, Your Honor. It has been a complaint of Ms. Cortez that Mr. Zamora files false reports with CPS against her. If I were to recall her, she would verify that. That is one of her complaints against him. So someone's not telling the truth. It's either A or non-A. It's logic.
All right.
Your Honor, if I can just jump in, I don't think the door has been opened just yet for that line of questioning. If Mr. Knight wants to recall Ms. Cortez, and if she does answer the way he expects her to answer, perhaps at that time there might be a door. The door might be open, but I guess just not yet.
I'm going to sustain the objection, and yeah, you can move on, Mr. Knight.
Mr. Zamora, it's your testimony you've never used illegal drugs?
I have a long time ago. I mean, I said that.
And you've never told CPS within the last year that you were using drugs again?
No.
Have you ever had a concern that your children were living in Miss Alvarado's car?
No.
Isn't it true that
I had a concern that I didn't know. I didn't know where they were living. So
isn't it true that you made arrangements at San Antonio College to get them housed with you because they did not have a place to stay?
No.
So they never lived with you in your so-called dorm room at San Antonio College?
A dorm room? I've never had a dorm room.
All right, that's really a good response, because where were you staying? Because you were in housing that San Antonio College set up. So what type of housing was it?
You're talking about a hotel?
Okay, thank you. So you were staying in a hotel, is that correct?
I stayed in a hotel for a little bit.
All right, and isn't it true that your student rep set it up for you to stay in the hotel with Miss Alvarado and the children?
She set it up for me. It's a student benefit. I invited Zenaida.
Okay. So it's your testimony that Miss Alvarado has never been homeless and living in her car with the children. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, no.
It's your testimony that she's never been using?
I don't believe so.
It's your testimony that she's never been selling?
I don't believe she has.
Have you known who was taking care of your children at all times when you were not together?
At all times, no. I would think that's kind of impossible.
And so if it's your testimony that you do not use drugs, why have you refused a drug test?
I did take a drug test.
When was the last time you took a drug test?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And when was the last time that you were offered a drug test?
I actually took a drug test on Monday as well.
Let me ask you this, how many different locations, to the best of your knowledge, have the children lived at in the past year or so?
In the past year,
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure. If I had to guess, I would say 3.
And what would those 3 locations be?
I would say in Harlingen with Mr. Alvarado.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, why did the family move to Harlingen, to the best of your knowledge?
Mr. Alvarado offered some help, and it was really beneficial.
All right, and for clarification purposes, you, Miss Alvarado, and all the children went to Harlingen, is that correct?
That's right.
And why did you leave Harlingen?
I moved to Beeville because my other daughter lives in Seguin, and this is a lot closer than Harlingen.
And when you moved back to Beeville, did you move together as a family, or did you move by yourself?
We all moved, me and Zenaida and the children.
And do you recall CPS contacting the children in Harlingen before you moved?
Right, yeah.
And so is it just a coincidence that the next day after CPS contacted your family that you moved back to Beeville?
I guess you could say that. You know, CPS even said they didn't have no concerns. I'd been planning this move to Beeville for a very long time.
A very long time. That's good. Now, when you moved to Harlingen from San Antonio, is that correct?
That's right.
Were you aware that the department was seeking to request that you and your family engage in services with CPS before you moved from San Antonio?
I don't even believe that's true. I don't believe they were.
So you did not have any conversations with the department, or I should say the department have any conversation with you regarding participating in services before you left San Antonio?
No, before they came to my kids, I hadn't had any conversation with the department for months.
For months.
Maybe around 6 months.
And you never requested the department intervene on behalf of your children?
It would have been before 6 months, and I never requested them to intervene. I expressed concerns.
And what were those concerns?
I didn't know where my children were. I couldn't get a hold of their mother. And after I got a hold of her, I actually expressed that I had no further concerns.
You had no, well, you said you had no further concerns. Well, what were the concerns you had at the time?
I didn't know where she was living. I just didn't know what was going on with my children.
And that was the only concern you had? You just didn't know where she was at?
Right.
Okay. And let me ask you this, did you ever live in Austin within the last 2 years?
Me, no, I've never lived in Austin.
Okay.
Ever.
And so then would it be a fair statement that Miss Alvarado moved from Austin to San Antonio, and that's where you met again?
Yeah, it could be.
It could be.
I'm not sure when she was in Austin, or I don't know. I wasn't in Austin.
All right, sir. Thank you. Pass the witness.
All right, Mr. Asari, do you have questions for Mr. Zamora?
Yes, Your Honor, I have some questions. Good afternoon, Mrs. Zamora.
Hello.
Let's talk a bit about your current living arrangements. Where are you living at now?
I have an apartment on.
Okay. How many bedrooms are in that apartment?
2.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I couldn't hear you at first.
Sorry.
And do you have furniture in that apartment?
Yes.
Okay. Beds for your kids to sleep in?
Yes, of course.
Okay. And there's food in the fridge.
Yes.
Okay. Working electricity in the apartment.
Yes, sir.
Very good. And if I could just clarify with you about your job situation. Currently, where are you working at again?
L&F distributors.
Okay. Is that a full-time job or a part-time job?
It's part-time. That's kind of why I'm doing the onboarding for Halliburton.
Okay. I guess the reason why you're doing the onboarding with Halliburton, would that be a full-time job?
Yes, it's full-time and more pay, more better benefits. I'm excited.
Very good. And when did you move into this apartment?
Um, Not sure the date. I think it was January.
Okay. And since moving into the apartment, been able to pay the rent on time?
Yes.
Okay. And did you sign a lease for this apartment?
Yes, I signed a year lease.
Okay. Very good. Very good. And before moving into this apartment in Beeville, um, had you been conducting a search for apartments in the area?
Yeah, in Beeville. Yeah, I've been trying to move back this way for a while. Harlingen's kind of far from my daughter.
Okay. For how long had you been searching for homes in the Beeville area?
And at least 2 months.
Okay. Okay. And the complex where you're staying at currently, about when did you first reach out to the complex to make an inquiry for whether they have any space available?
It was probably about 2 months before January.
Okay. And about when did you first learn that this complex has space available for you and your family?
It was probably yeah, like 2 months before January, say November. Um, yeah, they had been pretty much telling me that they have an opening just whenever I'm ready, when I have the money to come.
Okay. When did you get the money available to move in?
I believe it was in December. I know I came over here shortly after I got the money. I'd been waiting for it.
Okay. So it's safe to say this plan that the move to Beeville is a plan for some time. Is that correct?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. But I guess you had to wait for one real crucial factor, and that's money.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, with the way the financial aid works, sometimes it just pays out every semester, so you gotta wait till the next semester.
Okay. And once you're able to get that money together, that's when y'all made the move, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, were there any other reasons for making that move to Beeville other than waiting for the money?
Uh, Not really, I want to be close to my daughter, more space.
Okay. I guess if I get down to it, the move to Beeville was not due to running from CPS.
No, I'm pretty sure CPS there, as far as I was aware, they said they had no other concerns. They said they needed to take pictures of the children and they were done.
Okay. And while you guys were living in Harlingen, um, was your a child Raleigh enrolled in school?
Yes, she was.
Okay. And how about your stepdaughter? Was she enrolled in school in Harlingen?
Yes.
Okay. And then once y'all moved to Beeville, who enrolled your stepdaughter and Raleigh in school?
Tonight I did.
Okay. Okay. To your knowledge, had these two children missed school for any extended period of time?
No, Zenaida is pretty good on taking care of that. I think, once we came over here, she started contacting the school to enroll them.
To your knowledge, they've always been in school. Is that right?
Right.
Very good. Very good. And I know there's been some questions about a history of domestic violence, but Mrs. Zamora, had you ever been convicted of any family violence related offenses?
No, never.
Okay. I know you previously testified that you drug tested for the department. What were the results of that drug test?
Um, I believe they were all negative.
Okay, okay. And with this new job opportunity with Halliburton, are you required to drug test?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, okay. Have you already tested for Halliburton, or are you working on getting that scheduled?
I've already tested.
Very good, very good. And I know there's been some questions in the past about uh, your Native American ancestry. Well, before I go into that, let me go into past, if any, past communication with the department. Before contacted in Harlingen, when was the last time anyone with the department communicated with you?
And they didn't even communicate with me in Harlingen. The last time they communicated with me, I think it was September, maybe September of 2022.
Okay. In that conversation back in September of 2022, do you recall if you were asked whether you have Native American ancestry?
I don't recall.
Since moving into your home in Beeville, had anyone from the department requested to visit your home or tour your home to check it out?
No, Sandra told me one time that she needed to. I never heard from her again.
Okay. About when did she mention to you that she needed to view your home?
I think it was on the 15th. It was at visit.
Okay. 15th of this month?
Yes.
Okay. How about before then, before Sandra's request, had anyone from the department requested to check out your home to see if it's appropriate for kids?
No.
Okay. Okay. And how about before your children were, well, when were your kids removed from your care?
I believe it was January, around 28, somewhere around the end of January.
Okay. Before your children were removed from your care, had anyone asked to tour your home?
No.
Okay. And before your kids were removed from your care, had the department uh, offered you any services to do?
No.
Okay. But before your children were removed from your care, had anyone with the department voiced any concerns to you?
No.
Okay. No one voiced any reasons why the department wanted to remove your kids?
No. To me, no.
Okay. Okay. And since your kids were removed from your care, had anyone with the department offered you any services?
No.
Okay. since your children were removed from your care, had anyone offered to discuss any steps to get your kids back in your home?
No.
Do you have an idea of where she's living at now?
Yes.
Okay. Is the home that does it in the home, is there enough space for her and her children?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if anyone from the department had offered to check out her home?
I believe they did say that they were going to. I'm not sure if they ever did that. I do know that Mr. Beretta visited with us.
Okay. And did Mr. Barrera visit with y'all separately or together?
He visited with me one time by myself, and he also visited Zenaida's, and I was there. So I kind of let them talk.
Okay. Your Honor, those are all the questions I have at this time. I'll pass the witness.
All right. Does anyone else have questions for Mr. Zamora?
Yes, Your Honor, just a few.
All right.
Mr. Zamora, I would assume that when you moved in with Mr. Alvarado, that was not meant to be a permanent situation.
Right,
Correct.
of course.
Yeah, I would assume you wouldn't want to live with your girl's ex-boyfriend, correct?
Right. Although I appreciate his help.
Absolutely. And that's at that time, you and Miss Alvarado needed some help, correct?
Right.
Okay. So the point I'm making is you're always looking to get into your own place pretty quickly.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And now both you and Miss Alvarado both have homes where the children can be returned to.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And whenever you were around Miss Alvarado and the children, or would you describe Miss Alvarado as a good mother?
Yes.
Okay. When you were around her and the kids, were they always well cared for?
Yes.
Dressed with clean clothes?
Yes.
Were they fed?
Yes.
Were they bathed regularly?
Yes.
Would she take them to the doctors?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see is there any reason in your opinion that Miss Alvarado could not care for these children?
No.
Do you believe that if the kids were returned to Miss Alvarado, their physical safety or emotional well-being would be in any danger?
No, I don't think that they would be in any danger.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Judge, I have a few questions.
All right, Mr. Saldivar.
Yes, when you were in Mr. Alvarado's home, did he provide for you and the children?
Provide, like, what do you mean? Provide what?
What did he provide? He provided shelter, obviously, but food and any other things that you guys needed?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, he was very
Okay.
helpful.
Was his home appropriate?
Yes.
Was it safe?
Yes.
Okay, and his daughter was there as well with you guys, is that correct?
Right.
And would you say that he was bonded with his daughter?
Yeah.
Okay, and would you say that the time that you've known him, he's been willing to help Miss and you if you ever needed that help?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Pass the witness, Judge. Thank you.
Mr. Bunch, did you have any questions?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Zamora, you stated that you used drugs a long time ago. And you also stated you've done, I guess, a couple times, I think maybe what you said, 12-step programs. I'm just wondering if those two are related at all.
I mean, I guess it's something that people go to that have used drugs before. Yeah.
So it just helped you deal with, were you having issues staying off drugs?
No. I don't know. It's really hard to describe unless you've been, but the ones that I went to there is very good. Just hearing other people's stories and being able to share things that you're going through, like it's good.
So sort of like a therapy, sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you keep in touch with any of the people that you met through that program?
No, I might have some of them on Facebook, but I really don't keep in touch with many of them.
Okay. And I just want to get it clear. I'm not quite certain I have it clear on the move from San Antonio to Harlingen and then back to Beeville. I'm just so we're specific, why not move straight from San Antonio to Beeville if that was the end destination anyways?
I didn't have the money to do so.
What, and you were waiting on money from school? Is that what it
Right.
was? Okay. And what are you studying?
Network administration.
Okay. And is this basically free money or are these loans?
Both.
Okay. Are you close to graduation?
I mean, I feel like I am. I have a year left, but I feel like I'm almost there.
And your other child, I think you said you have one other child living in Seguin, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that child is not living with you now?
No.
Okay. How often do you see that child?
It varies. With her living in Seguin.
Okay. And you've never seen any violence, or have you seen any violence, I guess, between Ms. Cortez, Mr. Alvarado, or yourself?
No.
Okay. No further questions, Ron.
Can I just ask for my own benefit? Are you and Miss Alvarado in a relationship right now, Mr. Zamora?
I wouldn't say we're in a relationship.
All right. When's the last time you were?
Um,
I'm just trying to understand your relationship because it's not clear to me. So when was the last time you defined yourself as being together with Miss Alvarado?
if I had to guess, I'd say like a month ago.
All right, but you're not now?
Right.
All right, so you live separately. And did that coincide with the filing of this case that you live separately? Was around that same time?
I don't really understand what you mean, or
Like when CPS became involved, were you together before or after?
before CPS became involved, we were together.
Well, and remove the children. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, we were together. You know, I really feel like a lot of stress of our kids being gone has like affected us. I don't know. I'm very supportive of her. I wouldn't say we're together, but I'd like to be friends or be supportive.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Zamora?
Yes, Sean, I have a few.
Sorry.
Okay, let me get Mr. Knight first and we'll work back through.
Have you ever called law enforcement out because of family violence or having a fight with Miss Alvarado?
No.
You didn't? That didn't happen here in Beeville?
No, I've never fought with Miss Alvarado or violence.
Well, does she fight with you then?
No, I don't.
Why did law enforcement come out to, when y'all were living together previously here in Beeville within the last month, why was law enforcement called out to your location?
I don't know. You know, they didn't do anything.
Well, I want to clarify. Did law enforcement come out and talk with the two of you and mediate, or did they not?
I guess you could say that.
objection responsiveness. Did law enforcement come out to your location, yes or no?
Yes,
And who called who made the 911 call?
I did.
Okay. Why did you make the 911 call?
I don't know. Stressful times, miscommunication.
Do you make a habit of calling law enforcement out on Miss Zamora for no reason?
No, I don't.
So then you must have had a reason. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know. No, I really just feel like it was a mistake, and I feel like law enforcement didn't do anything. So I don't really know. I don't really know why they were there.
But you do admit that you called them.
Right,
But you don't know why you called.
right.
Well, that's as clear as mud. Let me talk to you about drug testing. You refused to take a hair follicle test. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
All right. And you did take a UA, but you delayed taking that UA, did you not?
No.
You did not take it the first time it was asked of you, did you?
I'm not too sure what the time frame from when it was asked to when I did it was.
And you remember being involved in a prior CPS case in which your children were removed from your care and custody, is that correct?
Yeah, like many years ago, yeah.
And what was the reason for that removal?
I don't know. There could have been a few reasons. I think being homeless is a major one.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I think being homeless, also not being aware of my rights.
That's what caused the old CPS case?
That's what caused my children to be removed.
That's your recollection, is that true?
That is correct.
All right, let's talk about recollections. It's your position that moving from Harlingen back to Beeville was a planned move, is that correct?
Yes, very planned and waited on.
It wasn't due to any family emergency or anything?
Family emergency? No, it was time to move.
Well, can you tell the court what were the circumstances that compelled you to move from San Antonio to Harlingen?
I needed help, and
What kind of help?
Mr. Alvarado, I didn't have a place to live at the time, and Mr. Alvarado offered a place to live.
Were you unemployed?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. Did Miss Alvarado have a place to live at that time?
No.
Was she employed at that time?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. She was employed, but she did not have a place to live. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how long did she not have a place to live before the decision was made to move to Harlingen?
I really don't remember.
You know, you have a real time with dates. You might ought to keep a calendar. My question is this: did the move to Harlingen? Did you call Mr. Alvarado, or did Mr. Alvarado contact y'all? I mean, how'd that come about?
He was talking with Zenaida.
Okay.
You know, you're asking me a lot of questions that involve her, not me.
Well, don't worry. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know, and I
But
accept it. Okay. But basically, do you have any knowledge as to who reached out to who?
no, again, like maybe you should ask her.
Well, we certainly will. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Osari, I think you indicated you had additional questions.
Yes, Your Honor, just a few questions. Mrs. Zamora, for your kids, Raleigh and Ethan, are you on a court-ordered visitation schedule for them?
I'm sorry. Do you mean as far as CPS?
No.
Or is this
Oh,
are
you
like
required to pay child
custody?
support?
Yeah, there's a current custody order between me and Zenaida.
Okay. What is your visitation schedule like in that custody order?
I believe it's the standard. I think it's like every other weekend. There's other little variations in it, but it's the standard.
Okay. And if your kids were returned to you all, of course, you and mom are in separate homes, so have to co-parent. Um, would you want to be under that standard visitation schedule?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And you feel that Miss Alvarado can provide a safe home for her kids?
Yes.
Okay. And let me just ask you briefly about your daughter in Seguin. Are you under a custody order for your daughter in Seguin?
Yes.
Okay. What type of visitation schedule is it?
It's the same. It's the same visitational order. Yeah, I don't get to do it all the time because she's in Seguin, but hopefully I can soon.
Understandable, but at least the visitation schedule for your daughter in Seguin, the visits you have unsupervised access to your daughter. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually I spent the weekend with my daughter. It was great.
Good, good. Those are all the questions I have. I'll pass the witness.
Any other questions for Mr. Zamora? All right, if not, Mr. Knight, who is your next witness?
I'm gonna recall Ms. Cortez or Zenaida Alvarado.
All right, thank you. Mr. Knight, you may proceed.
Ms. Alvarado, isn't it true that you complained to CPS that you were a victim of family violence?
No,
You-
I've never said I was a victim of family violence.
All right, you didn't accuse Mr. Zamora of always hitting you?
No, I've never said that, ever.
Have the cops ever been called out to when
I can't hear you, sir.
were the cops ever called out to where you and him were together?
Right, but I don't know how that's family violence.
Well, let me just ask you this. I mean, did you call the cops out or did he call the cops out?
I've never called the cops.
Okay, so if the cops got called out, he would have called them out on you.
I've never called the cops.
Just listen to my question. Basically,
I'm answering it.
I
I've
know.
never called the police.
So if you didn't call the police, it would have had to be him, correct?
Objection on calls for speculation. It could have been called by someone else. They live in apartments.
I'm going to overrule
good
that
objection.
objection. You can answer the question, Ms. Cortez.
I did.
Okay. Well, in other words, you don't know whether or not he was the one that called out the cops or not.
I know that I didn't call the cops. Could have been a neighbor. I assumed it was him.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Did you have an encounter with law enforcement in B County within the last 30 days?
I'm sorry?
Did you have an encounter with law enforcement in B County with Mr. Zamora within the last 30 days or so?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also have an encounter with law enforcement back up in Bexar County when y'all were at the hotel?
No arrests were ever made. At a motel, no.
I'm just asking, did you have an encounter with law enforcement at the hotel?
No. Not at a motel, no.
At the hotel, excuse me.
No.
Terms are so important. And basically, it's your testimony.
No,
that,
not at the motel.
Okay. But basically, and you moved from the valley because that was a planned move and there was no emergency involved whatsoever.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Pass the witness.
Anyone else have questions for Ms. Alvarado? All right. If not, who's your next witness, Mr. Knight?
Miss Ramos or Miss Velise.
Okay.
All right. And did you have occasions to contact the Alvarado or Zamora children?
Yes, I had a case our case was to make contact with the children.
And who requested you make contact with the children?
It was sent to us. I believe it was a courtesy that came down from, I believe it was Corpus.
All right. And did you make contact with the children?
Well, I made contact with the oldest.
And where did you make contact with the oldest child at?
I made contact with her at school.
All right. And was that a one-time thing?
Yes.
Did you attempt to make further contact with that child?
Well, we had first, myself and the special investigator had gone out to the residence first. We left our card. And then from there, we proceeded to the school. While I was at the school interviewing the oldest child, Miss Zenaida called me and asked me to stop the interview and not see her other child.
All right. And did you attempt any further contact with the child after that date?
No.
And do you have any knowledge of as to how long the family stayed in Harlingen after that?
I believe I went out on a Friday, and by the next week they were gone.
All right. Did you contact the school to see if they left a forwarding address or what the reason for the withdrawal was?
Yes, I did.
Objection calls for hearsay, Your Honor.
I'm asking her to testify as to the results of her investigation.
I'll sustain the objection. You can ask in a different way, Mr. Knight.
All right. Now then, so did you go to the school again after the family left?
I called the school to see if they were there, and I was given the forwarding address.
Okay. And what was the forwarding address?
I don't have it right off the top of my
Was
head.
any reason given for the move?
Excuse me?
Was there any reason?
Objection, that's this hearsay, Your Honor. It's coming from a person who is not here to be a witness, and it's being sought for the truth of the matter asserted.
I'll sustain the objection. You may ask your next question, Mr. Knight.
Let me ask you this. Do you remember do you have any idea what town or county that the forwarding address was?
Beeville.
Beeville. Okay. Did you attempt to contact Miss Alvarado and Miss Cortez again?
No, I did not. Once I got the forwarding email, we sent a courtesy to have the case moved that way.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
Does anyone have questions for Ms. Ellis? No? Mr. Asari?
I do. Ms. Velez, what was the date for when you interviewed the oldest child?
Give me a second. I can give it to you right now.
I guess
Sorry.
the date's not all too important, but
Actually, it is.
if you
Well, I
don't
would
have
like
it
to
in
know
front
the
of you,
date.
it's
On Friday, January the 13th at 1:13.
okay. Thank you. And when you met with the child, did you see any concerns with her or notice any signs of abuse or neglect?
I did notice her to not, she was not I don't want to say properly, but her clothes did appear to be dirty. She did appear to have not be as clean.
Did you see any bruises on her?
No bruises.
Okay. Did she make any outcries to you?
No, she did not. She said she ever got in trouble. Her phone was taken away. She had food, light, water. No outcry was made.
Okay. So she told you her needs were met?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And she even told you that if she gets in some trouble, there's some
there's
discipline involved,
consequences.
right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll pass the witness. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have questions for Ms. Ellis? If not, may Ms. Ellis be excused at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Ellis, thank you for your patience and your testimony. You may be
Thank you.
excused.
I will go with Ms. Vasquez, Your Honor. All right. In
All
your
right.
capacity as an investigator, do you have any occasion to contact the Alvarado / Zamora family?
Yes.
And what was the nature of your contact?
So I had seen Miss Alvarado back in September of 2022. When I had received the case from it was a recovery case. So I met with
When you
her.
call it a recovery case, what do you mean by a recovery case?
That means that another investigator was working the case prior to myself. So that investigator was either no longer with the department or like on leave, medical leave. I'm not too sure, but I received the case then.
All right. What was the nature of the concern that brought the family to your attention?
So there was information. I received another report stating that mother had relapsed on methamphetamine and was in a relationship with an unknown male.
All right. And were you able to follow up on that and talk to any of the mother, the father, the children?
So I was able to see mom. I had gone to where the kids were enrolled at the time. And I had arrived a little, after 8 o'clock. And I was attempting to see the children while I was there. Mom was bringing in the children late. So at that time, she knew that CPS was there. So I followed her out the door. And then I proceeded to engage with her outside and explain my role with the department and explain that I was a new caseworker on this case. I'm so sorry. Can I shut this door?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Sorry, I'm sorry. One moment. So I informed mom on my role. So she was super upset. She told me that I was not allowed to speak with her kids in the school. So I said, hey, can I just, see them, see how they're doing? And I was able to see them out in the parking area. And we talked briefly for a minute.
All right, let me ask you this. Did you ask for any drug tests?
Yes, I did ask for a drug test. She was highly upset. She stated that she felt harassed by the department, for the drug test. She stated that before that she had submitted a test to the department. And I told her that, there was a new intake. Again, she was highly upset.
Isn't it true that there were multiple reports that came in alleging drug use?
Yes.
And who else did you make contact besides the mother of the children?
So I had contacted dad via telephone. And, he was, it was kind of weird. He was yawning on the phone when I was asking, about, mom and substances. He just disconnected the phone and then that was it. And I tried to call him.
Did he seem to share any of the concerns that the department had received?
Not really. No, he was just very, like I stated, kind of a little evasive. And he just said, that, I'm so sorry. I can't remember exactly what his words were, but he was super uncooperative.
Ms. Vasquez, based on your investigation, did the department feel a need to ask for any services?
Well, yes. I mean, mom's had an extensive history with the department from 2016 to 2022. So in that history, there is reference of substance abuse.
And let me ask you this, what type of action was the department considering taking?
I'm sorry?
What action was the department going to recommend?
Services for mom, treatment, drug treatment, if needed.
And would that be
family-based safety services?
Are you talking about a motion to participate?
Oh, yes. I filed for a motion to participate.
And how long does it take to get one of those approved?
A while. I filed mine in October and in December it was still pending.
All right. And basically, did you lose? I mean, were you able to maintain contact with the family at all times?
No. Because when I had gone out, she wasn't on a lease. She gave me a friend's information to contact. And when I asked to go and see the family in their environment, they denied me.
All right, so basically, you did not know where the family was living and had no forwarding address. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, but had the family stayed in Bear County, the department would have requested a motion to participate there. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, I had already requested that through the court, but it was still pending.
It was still pending, and then the family moved. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Pass the witness.
All right. Let me ask Ms. Savage, any questions from you?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Vasquez, when you saw the children, did they appear to be okay?
Yes, they seemed appropriately dressed when I did see them.
Okay.
They-
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, they looked good. Yes. I mean, I'm not a physician, so in regard to height and weight, if it was appropriate, I'm not too sure.
Okay, but no visible signs of any kind of neglect.
No, no marks, bruises, or injuries that I saw.
Okay. And then you talked about services. So did you offer the mother services?
Yes.
Okay. And you talked about filing a motion to participate in Bear County. Do you have a cause number for that?
You know, I don't have that available on me. No, I'm so sorry.
But it was actually never set for any kind of hearing. Is that correct?
No, it was pending that entire time.
Okay. Never requested any kind of service on the mother?
Did I request services? Yes, for family.
No, services like citation.
A citation.
So I guess when you say pending, who was it pending with? Was it pending in the CPS system, like your supervisor hadn't approved it?
Oh, no, no, it's pending with Bear County Court, with the court system, with CPS.
How long was it pending for?
So I submitted it October the 5th, I believe. And then by December, I believe the second week, the 16th, is when I found out that they were no longer at the school. They were disenrolled. So I lost grounds for that MTP here in Bear County.
Okay, so it was pending for almost, well, 2 months.
Yes.
So one of the biggest counties in Texas with lots of CPS cases just let that pen for 2 months.
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Okay. Do you think it's 2 months is a realistic wait time?
That I'm not too sure. You'd have to ask legal. I'm not sure how that works. I mean, do I have concerns? Yes. Could mom have engaged in services? Yes. And almost be done with whatever it was that she could? Yes. But she didn't. She fled.
Well, she actually waited 2 months, and at that point, CPS still hadn't made any movements. Is that
Well,
correct?
actually, she disenrolled the children in November from the school. And she informed staff that she was going
Objection,
to.
Your Honor, non-responsive. So you didn't make any efforts on the case until December, because you didn't find out that they were disenrolled until December 16th.
Yes.
Okay, so you just didn't do any work on the case for 2 months.
You can say that. Well, I mean, I attempted to.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Does anyone else have questions for Ms. Vasquez? Ms. Vasquez,
Your Honor.
well, I just want to
You first.
make it clear, when you say pending in Bear County Court, had you submitted it to the DA's office and were awaiting them filing? Or was it filed with the court and you were awaiting a court date with Bear County courts?
We were waiting a court date.
Your Honor, I don't know if that's accurate. I've asked for a cause number for this MTP several times from several different people, and nobody has ever been able to send me any kind of
Permission to
MTP.
speak, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Knight.
I think Ms. Savage has the right of it because, as I understand it, the request was made. It was still going through process, and nothing had been filed. And then the family moved, which short-circuited the process.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
All right, because a court is required to try to set that hearing within 14 days. So I'm imagining it never got to Bear County Court. It was within the DA's office there. Is that likely, Ms. Vasquez, your understanding?
Yes, very likely.
Okay. All right, Mr. Knight, your question?
Ms. Vasquez, when you went to check on with the school, when were the children taken out of school?
It was November. I think it was right before Thanksgiving is when they were taken out of school.
All right. And was the school giving a forwarding address?
No, they just stated that that mom stated that she was moving to Harlingen.
Okay. And how long did the family leave in your best estimate, how long was the family in Bexar County after you made contact with the family before they moved?
From September, I made contact with mom in September, I think the 9th, and until November. I don't remember the exact date. I want to say maybe around the 15th or so.
Thank you, Pass the witness.
Your Honor, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Mr. Bunch, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Vasquez, you stated that there were multiple reports of drug use by Zenaida.
Yes,
And by that, without revealing any confidential information, you mean multiple people reported it?
I believe so, in her history.
Okay. Did you have a chance prior to the children being disenrolled in the school, did you have a chance to check on the children's attendance at the school?
They wouldn't know because they wouldn't give me that information.
Okay, so you don't know how often or how frequently they attended school?
No.
No further questions.
Anyone else have questions for Ms. Vasquez?
I forgot one area.
Okay.
Ms. Vasquez, briefly, we've been talking about mom. Did the department receive any reports of drug use on behalf of the father, Alex Zamora?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that those were self-admissions?
Yes.
Thank you, Pass the witness.
Ms. Vasquez, can you elaborate?
Elaborate on
What did Mr. Zamora disclose to you?
To me, he didn't disclose anything. It's just through going through the history of their time with CPS.
All right. Well, how recent was his admission to your recollection?
I cannot recall, ma'am. I'm so sorry.
All right. All right. Anyone else have questions for Ms. Vasquez, or may she be excused at this time?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Vasquez, thank you for your patience and your testimony. You may be
Thank you.
excused at this time. All right, thank you. Mr. Knight, you may proceed.
Mr. Ortiz, please state your occupation.
Yes, sir. My name's I'm Jesus Ortiz, and I'm a CPI supervisor for the department.
And in what department?
The Department of Family and Protective Services.
Oh, that was so good. What particular department?
And for investigations.
Thank you. That wasn't hard, was it? Okay. Now, when was the first time that you had an occasion to contact this family personally?
So initially, I contacted this family back in July of 2022.
All right. And what concerns led to that contact?
There was concerns for methamphetamine use and neglectful supervision of the children.
All right. And who did you contact first?
I contacted Ms. Zenaida Alvarado.
And how did you contact her? Was it face-to-face or telephone?
It was actually telephone. There wasn't an address on the intake. So I did reach out to her through phone to see if I can meet with her.
Okay. And were you able to meet with her?
Yes, I was.
Can you describe that meeting?
So during that meeting, we did meet at Zilker Park. It's a park in Beeville. Initially, she stated she was out of town.
Objection response to Zilker Park is a park in Austin.
It's not Zilker Park, I'm sorry, Clipstein Park.
All right, thank you.
It was a Clipstein Park in Beeville. That's where I met with Miss Zenaida and her 3 children.
All right, and what was the nature of your conversation?
So initially, I wanted to see what the plans were for her. She stated that she was in a domestic violent relationship with Mr. Zamora. She stated that she believed he had reported the intake, but that she had planned on moving to Colorado actually, and that she would be checking into a shelter.
All right, let me ask you this. Did she appear to be that she was in fact moving?
She did.
And why do you say that?
She did have her vehicle with her, and it was filled with clothing boxes. It was filled. It was very crowded in that vehicle.
All right, and did you request any drug tests in order to rule out drug use?
So I did request a drug test, which she agreed to go follow up on that. I also looked up the shelters in Colorado Springs, where she had mentioned that she would be moving to Colorado Springs. When I told her about that, she said, well, I don't feel comfortable going there anymore now that I know where you're going to be now that the department is going to be aware. So I explained to her that the process would be simple, that it just would entail a welfare check per se by either law enforcement or a department-like entity out of Colorado, just to verify that she had actually moved to Colorado.
Well, isn't it true that a timely drug test would have ended the investigation right then?
Yes.
Okay. And did you continue tracking the family?
Yes, I did.
And how did you manage that?
So in that situation, we never had an address until July the 25th, where we received another referral, because initially I would reach out to Ms. Alvarado and she would tell me that she was in different areas. I had a work trip in Dallas and I had a layover in Austin. She had told me she was in Austin, so I figured we can follow up there. However, later on, she never provided a forwarding address, so we weren't able to transfer the case until there was a new intake, an INR received. So that's an INR, just so you're aware, it's what we call, it's when there's additional information to a case. And this INR stated that she was actually in San Antonio.
All right. And did the referral include anything else other than her geographical location?
So instead of that, she was actually trying to check in herself into a local shelter, and that she had been previously staying at Homeless Connections, which is another shelter, and that she was unsuccessful, so that they had the INR stated that there was concerns for homelessness by Ms. Alvarado.
All right, but for clarification purposes, she was in Austin, and
she stated she was in Austin.
Okay. All right. But the shelters you mentioned by name, was that in Bexar County or Travis County?
It was in Bexar County.
Okay. And isn't it true the department can continue to receive reports?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you request that Bexar County handle it as a courtesy?
No, so once we received the follow-up report, we were able to verify that she in fact was residing in Bexar County, so we transferred the case over to Bexar County.
Now, the referral that you talked about in July, that was for concerns over homelessness, is that correct?
And for methamphetamine use.
Okay. And you kept following the case, is that not correct?
That's correct.
And so again, CPS made contact with the family in Bexar County, is that correct?
That's correct.
Drug tests were requested, is that true?
That's also correct.
Drug tests were not provided, is that correct?
That's also correct.
And then the family moved from Bexar County, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now then, did CPS have a forwarding address from Bexar County, as to best of your knowledge?
No, the department didn't have a forwarding address.
And so how did the department locate the family in Harlingen?
The department has this process called a C-Scout. So while investigations itself doesn't handle that aspect, it's typically a special investigator. It's very similar, I guess you can compare it to an Amber Alert, where law enforcement agencies are provided this information. And if anyone makes contact with these children, typically law enforcement, if it's, for example, like a traffic stop, anything like that, it's typically, it alerts somebody from the department to make contact anywhere in the state until the children are found and observed to be safe. And in this situation, this was confirmed out of the valley. So that's how the case was. A forwarding address was found in the valley.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Ortiz. Is that procedure used every time the department loses contact with the family?
No, that's correct.
Is regardless of the priority?
Regardless of the priority, just to ensure that the children are safe. It's more typical with families that are uncooperative or not making themselves available to the department.
Would you characterize Ms. Cortez or Ms. Alvarado as being uncooperative?
Definitely.
And you've heard the testimony that basically she had a reason for every time that she moved. Do you agree or disagree with her position?
But I disagree with her reasonings.
And why do you think that she moved?
I think ultimately she was hoping that if she would stay under away from the department would have closed.
Calls for speculation.
I'm going to overrule. You can give your assessment, and I understand it's your opinion.
Typically, if a case remains open for so long and the department can locate the family, we proceed with closing the case as what we call UTC, or unable to complete. And this means that the department made all efforts to locate the family, locate the children within an ample time frame. And while it's on a case-by-case basis where a program director has to approve when the case can be closed out, typically there has to be reasonable efforts by the department that we attempted to locate the family prior to closing out the case. And I believe that that's what Ms. Alvarado was trying to do.
All right, Mr. Ortiz, isn't it true that basically when you're asking someone to drug test and they won't drug test for you, you consider that to be an admission of use?
Typically, yes.
And this case could have been ended months and months ago, but we couldn't get a drug test. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And would you believe that the constant refusal to drug test is an indication of continuous use?
That's correct.
And in this case, both the mother and the father have been uncooperative with their drug test. Is that not true?
That's also correct.
And do you believe, is it reasonable to assume that they are continuing to use?
That's correct.
Now then, in regards to the father, Alex Zamora, isn't it true that he showed up for visitation under the influence?
I can't testify for that. I'm not. I wasn't.
I'll call another witness. Thank you, Pastor.
I wasn't available.
All right. Anyone, Ms. Savage, do you have questions for Mr. Ortiz?
Mr. Ortiz, Ms. Alvarado never made any admissions of use to you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever see the children?
Yes, I did.
And when you saw the children, did they appear to be healthy?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Did they make any outcries of abuse or neglect?
Ms. Alvarado didn't allow me to interview them. Okay.
But you didn't see any bruising on them or marks on them at all?
No, I did not.
I'll pass one.
All right. Mr. Asari, any questions from you?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Saldivar?
Yes, during your investigation, did you ever come in contact with Mr. Alvarado, Eric Alvarado?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay, and were there any concerns at the time during your investigation with Mr. Eric Alvarado?
I did not have concerns with him at that time.
Okay, thank you. Pass the witness.
All right. All right, Mr. Bunch, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Any follow-ups, Mr. Knight, or do you want to call your next witness?
We'll let him go for the time, Your Honor. Call Ms. Lopez. Ms. Lopez, you are currently employed by CPS in what capacity?
I am the conservatorship worker assigned to the case.
And did you previously work in investigations?
Yes, sir.
And prior to that, did you also serve as a probation officer with the judicial district courts of B, Live Oak, McMullen, and Aransas County?
Yes, sir.
All right. And did you have occasion to supervise visitation of the Alvarado children?
Yes, sir.
And particularly, do you have occasion to observe the visitation with Alex Zamora and the children?
Yes, sir.
And what, if anything, occurred?
On this past Wednesday, Mr. Zamora appeared to be under some type of substance, and he also had an odor of marijuana on his person when he came to the visit.
So based on his physical appearance, his actions, and the odor of marijuana, you assume that he was using?
Yes.
And did that short circuit the visit?
No, the visit continued since I was monitoring it. And after the visit, he was requested to submit to a drug test, which he stated he was not going to submit to a drug test. And I informed him that I was going to note that he did not refuse to submit to a drug test and that he had an odor of marijuana on him. And he said, okay.
And in regards to drug tests, isn't it true that you also contacted the mother or had contact with her regarding a possible drug test?
Yes, I spoke to her on March the 10th and requested she submit to a urine screen and hair follicle, and she stated no. And then on March 17th, I also requested that she submit to a drug test and to meet me at the clinic at 5:30. Since she did not have any identification, she showed up at 6 and I had already left the clinic. And she was asked to submit to a observed urine screen due to concerns of possibly tampering, because she kept entering and leaving the clinic to her car, and she was late for her drug test. The reason for the request was Miss Alvarado also appeared to be under some type of, the influence of some substance. Her eyes were very small, and there was concern for her being under the influence. The department also requested that she submit to a hair follicle, and she declined that as well.
All right, Ms. Lopez, you were previously an investigator with the department, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that you were the investigator on the prior CPS case on this family, which led to the removal? Is that right?
I was not the one that was involved with the removal. That was another investigator. I have been involved with this family on, I believe, like 4 separate investigations.
And so you were never, but you were involved with him in an official capacity, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what were the problems that the family was having at that time?
There were concerns of substance abuse and domestic violence. During the investigations, Miss Alvarado and Mr. Zamora were uncooperative, and in one instance, a motion to participate was filed for them because Miss Alvarado would not allow me to speak to the children.
All right, and the prior case was the case which involved the removal, is that correct?
No, sir, that was before my time.
Before your time, okay. And I thought you'd been there forever.
Something that feels like that.
Okay. All right. So basically, it's your opinion that he was under the influence, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that same concern was expressed in regards to Miss Alvarado as well?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
All right. Ms. Savage?
I just want to clarify that motion to participate. Are you referring to the one out of Bear County?
No, sir. No, ma'am. I'm sorry. It was, I believe in 2020, year 2020, there was a motion to revote. I'm sorry, motion to participate filed by the department.
Okay. I will pass witness, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Asari, any questions?
Yes, just a few questions. Good afternoon, Ms. Lopez.
Hello.
Now, a notification to the court was filed in reference to the March 15th visit you just testified about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in looking at that notification to the court, the only thing reported is that you smelled an odor of marijuana on Mr. Zamora. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is it true that the notification to the court that was filed did not reference any appearance of being under a substance? Is that correct?
No, sir, did not mention that. But that is my testimony.
So your testimony now is that he appeared to be under the influence?
Yes, that was the reason we requested that he submit to a drug test that day.
Okay. What behavior did you note that made you believe he may be under the influence?
His eyes were glassy. He was not able to stand straight. He was weaving from side to side when he was talking. He just had the appearance of being under the influence of a substance.
Okay. And as far as a reference to the eyes, there could be a variety of different reasons other than being under some substance for that. Is that correct?
I'm sure there is, but he had the odor of marijuana on his body, and when he spoke, you could smell it coming from on his breath as well.
No further questions. I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Saldivar, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Bunch?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to be clear about what you're saying about Ms. Cortez. You stated that her pupils were small during the Wednesday visitation.
No, I said that her eyes were small, like her eyelids were
Like
not
close-
open, but were drooping, I guess you could say. And she had her eyes appeared glassy.
Were they red?
No. No, I wasn't that close to her to see if her eyes were red.
Okay, and you didn't notice the size of her pupils?
No, sir.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Anyone else?
Briefly, Your Honor, Ms. Lopez, you actually filed two notifications to the court. Is that not correct? One, which is dated the 14th of March, and the other one dated the 21st of March.
Yes, sir.
And it is the last notification to court, which actually you do meant, which is I show dated the 21st of March. You mentioned your suspicions of marijuana use by Mr. Zamora. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And basically, in your capacity working for CPS and also work for the probation department, you have some training in detecting the influence of drugs in people?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. How long did you work for the probation department?
I worked for the probation department for over 20 years, supervising a caseload with offenders who were in long-term substance abuse treatment, residential treatment, from anywhere from 9 months to a year. And I also was clinical director at the residential substance abuse treatment facility.
And how long have you been with CPS now?
A little over 5 years.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
If no one else has questions for Ms. Lopez, may she be excused at this time?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lopez, for your testimony. You may be
Thank you.
excused. Mr. Knight, you may call your next witness.
Call Eric Alvarado,
Thank
Your
you.
Honor.
You may proceed,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Knight.
Thank you. Mr. Alvarado, can you tell how the family came to live with you?
I found out that they were living in a shelter, so I asked them to come stay with me because I didn't want the kids in the streets or in the shelter.
Okay. And so did they move themselves or did you help them move?
I picked them up.
And so you picked them up and you brought everyone, Alex, Zenaida, and all three children to live with you. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were you, when they left your home, were you given any reason for why they were leaving?
For their money to get a house. So,
Okay.
okay, can you hear me? I don't know. My
Yes.
video is not working. It just cut
Well,
off. I don't know.
It's better though. I don't want your video
Okay.
because, yeah. All right. So go ahead and continue.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Alvarado, basically, you were concerned that the over homelessness for your child. Is that correct?
Well, yes, well, they were in a shelter, and I had just found out that they were. So once I did, that's when I went to go pick them up.
And how did you find out, sir?
I think Nani ended up telling me. Yes.
And who is that?
Zenaida. Yes, Miss Zenaida. Sorry.
Okay, so she called you, or did you call her?
She called me.
Okay, and basically, you've submitted a negative UA. Is that correct?
Negative? No. They haven't told me anything about the UA.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Well, they haven't told me anything about it, but yes, I'm assuming.
All right. Well, I'll clear that up. I apologize. But basically, if the court takes conservatorship of children, you're asking for your child to be placed with you, are you not?
Yes, and the other children, if possible.
Okay. Well, do you have any concerns if the children were to remain in the care and custody of their mother or Mr. Zamora?
No,
You're not aware of any problems the family has?
well, read what the paperwork had said, but since I've been with, my daughter, I haven't seen or heard anything about the situations that's been going on.
All right, sir. But you're asking for possession of your daughter, is that correct?
Yes, if possible. Yes, sir.
Thank you, past witness.
Mr. Saldivar?
Yes, Mr. Alvarado, you understand the department has concerns of Ms. Alvarado and Mr. Zamora's drug use?
Yes, sir.
And you're asking that your daughter, and if so, if possible, all the children to return to your care. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if the department and the court asks you to be protective of the children and prevent visitation in some aspects with mom and Mr. Zamora, will you follow those court orders?
I have to follow the rules. Yes, sir.
Okay, and at this time, do you have space for the children in your home?
Yes, I do.
And where are you living currently?
Harlingen.
Okay, and you've while this case has been reset multiple times, you've been able to work with the investigator and alleviate any concerns that they have. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've made yourself available for them to visit your home.
Yes, sir.
And you've also drug tested for the department. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And to your knowledge, the department did they share any concerns with you at this time?
No.
Okay. And are you currently working right now?
Yes, sir. Every single day.
And what do you do for work?
I lay concrete pavers. I work with tropical patios.
Okay. And do you believe that you can provide a safe and stable home for your daughter?
Yes.
Okay. And if the court were to order temporary managing conservatorship, you're asking for the children to be returned immediately to your home. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you asking the court to waive a service plan for you because you're a non-offending parent in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Pass the witness, Judge.
All right. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Alvarado?
Yes, just a few.
Okay.
Mr. Alvarado, while Miss Alvarado and Mr. Zamora resided in your home, did you ever see them use any kind of illegal drugs?
No.
Did you ever, or did they ever appear to you to be under the influence?
No.
Did you have any indication that they were using any kind of illegal drugs while they lived with you?
No. If they did, then they would be now.
Okay. I'll pass the
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly.
Mr. Assange?
Mr. Alvarado, when the family first came into your home, what was the plan? Was the plan for a permanent home, or was it the plan for a temporary placement?
It was temporary. I knew that they were getting money, and like I said, the kids were at a shelter at the time, and I didn't accept that.
Okay, so at that time you had an idea about the family looking for a place of their own?
Yes.
Okay, and when the kids first went to your home, did you notice? Did they appear to be healthy to you?
Yes.
Okay, you didn't notice any bruises on them?
No, not at all.
Okay, it did to you. It did not appear that they were neglected in any way. The kids?
No.
Okay, those are the questions. I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Alvarado, you went and got the children, well, everyone, I guess, because they were living in a shelter, correct?
Yes.
Has that ever happened before?
No.
Are you worried that they might end up in a shelter again?
No, but if it does happen, the kids are more than welcome to be over here.
Okay. So if the department isn't granted TMC, you would want your daughter to stay with Zenaida?
What does that mean? TMC or what?
Sorry, temporary managing conservatorship. Basically, if the case is dismissed, say the department doesn't exist, you would want your child to be with Zenaida?
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's where she needs to be with her, her mother,
And from your perspective, why did they leave Harlingen?
They were getting their funds to move to another house. It wasn't permanent over here.
Okay. Have you ever seen any violence between Zenaida and anyone?
No.
Have you ever seen any violence between Mr. Zamora and anyone?
No,
And you and Zenaida have never had any domestic violence issues in the past?
no, never.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Saldivar.
Yes, Mr. Alvarado, did Ms.
Yes, sir.
Alvarado ever share with you that she was struggling with homelessness or anything like that?
No. Once I found out, I went to go pick them up immediately.
Okay, but prior to that one time that they did come live with you, did you ever have any indication from mom or the children that they were struggling with homelessness or anything like that?
No.
And how before this CPS case, did you have frequent contact with your daughter?
Yes.
Okay, and in those contacts, did she ever express any concerns with mom, or that she was on drugs, or that she was having any domestic violence issues with any of her boyfriends?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, you've heard all the concerns at this point. Do you have any personal knowledge of any of the allegations that the department's making against Ms. Alvarado?
No.
Okay, and if it were to be found that she is dealing with drugs or domestic violence at this time, would you still want your daughter to be living with Ms. Alvarado?
No.
Okay. Pass the witness, Judge.
I was going to recall him, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Ortiz is previously sworn, so you may proceed.
Mr. Ortiz, for the record, Mr. Alvarado did submit to drug testing and tested negative. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And the department does not have any concerns regarding his household?
That's correct.
Now, in regards to the case before us, do you believe, in fact, that the children, if allowed to remain in the care and custody of Mr. Zamora and Ms. Cortez Alvarado, would be in imminent danger?
Yes, I do believe so.
Despite the denials, take into consideration their history and the absolute refusal to drug test, you believe that they are continuously using at this time?
Yes, I do.
And for example, the marijuana use testified to, or odor of marijuana testified to regarding Mr. Zamora, and also Miss Alvarado's demeanor during a requested drug test. Those things just consolidate your concerns, do they not?
That's correct.
You
All
believe
right, I'm sorry, Mr. Knight. Mr. Zamora, you need to stop that clapping and your hand raising.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn it off. It's not.
It needs to happen now. Thank you. All right.
I'm pressing the, okay, there it goes.
Just keep your hands off the screen until the case is resolved, all right? And that'll
Yeah,
prevent
that was
that
an
from happening.
accident.
All
I
right,
didn't mean
Mr.
to press
Knight.
that.
Let me just sum it up. Mr. Ortiz, you believe there's a need for the department's intervention in this case
Yes, I do.
for the safety and protection of the children?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, pass the witness.
One follow-up,
Alright.
Judge.
All right, Mr. Salvador.
Do you think Mr. Alvarado will be protective of the children if his daughter's placed in his care?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, and do you believe that he has a safe and stable home?
Yes.
Do you believe that Mr. Alvarado presents any danger to his child returning home to him
Not
today?
at this time.
Okay, pass the witness, Judge. Thank
Mr.
you.
Knight, do you have any other witnesses to
Your
call?
Honor, it's 4:59. I understand the time constraints, the department rests.
All right, Ms. Savage, any witnesses from you?
If I can briefly call my client, Ms. Zenaida. And Your Honor, if you can enable screen share.
Sure.
Ms. Cortez, you heard the testimony of CPS coming out to see your daughter on January 13th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were in contact with the apartment complex prior to CPS making any contact with y'all. Is that correct?
Yes, on the 12th.
Would you agree with me that you messaged the complex January 12th, the night before DFPS made any contact with you?
Yes, and months prior to that, actually, too.
Would you agree that the first time you made contact with the apartment complex was on September 29th or 21st?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can do that again. Okay. Can you see the
Yeah.
message now?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is the Colonial Apartment located here in Beeville, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you reached out in September, they didn't get back to you December. And then can you read that date for me?
January 12th,
Okay.
2023.
All right, I move to admit respondents
One is
one.
admitted.
And then Ms. Cortez, it was testified that you were going to move to Colorado Springs. Can you just set the record straight as to if you were going to move there, or what was the issue with that?
Right. No, it was never Colorado Springs. I had mentioned that I wanted to go to Denver and I wanted to go to a Salvation Army. However, my custody order with Mr. Zamora, like, I can't do that. I can't move out of state without his permission. So I was unable to do so.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Anyone else have questions for Ms. Alvarado?
One question, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarado, I realize you want your children back today. If you can't get your children back today, do you have any objection to them living with Mr. Eric Alvarado?
If I can't get my kids back today?
That's correct.
I have no concerns for Eric Alvarado.
Thank you. Same question to Mr. Zamora, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Zamora, you're being recalled and you're still under oath. You may ask your question.
Mr. Zamora, if you cannot get your children back today, do you have any objection to them living with Mr. Alvarado?
I have objections to not getting my children back. I've done everything that he's done also.
Mr. Alvarado,
and I took a UA.
I'm asking you, if you can't get your children back today, do you have any objection to them living with Mr. Eric Alvarado?
My answer is I object to not getting my kids back.
No further questions, Your Honor.
I can call briefly just Mr. Zamora, just in case he has anything else to let the court know. Okay, Mr. Zamora, is there anything you wish to add to the testimony you've previously provided?
I would just like to say there was times where they said as if I refused a drug test, and I never did. I took a UA from the department. This is actually the first time that they asked me to take one.
Okay, so before being requested to take the UA that you went on ahead and you took, before then you were not requested the drug test?
No.
Okay. Those are the questions I have. I'll pass the witness.
Counsel, briefly, Your Honor, the actions of Ms. Cortez, Ms. Alvarado, Mr. Zamora in constantly refusing to take drug tests when that would clear this up, and the constant movement indicates to me, looking at their history, that basically everything that all the department's concerns are valid. And unfortunately, it appears that they both relapsed and they are using drugs. Since they've been given so many opportunities to test and they refuse to test every time, that indicates to me that they're using drugs continuously. And the drug of choice in the past has been methamphetamines and other very dangerous substances. So we do believe the children are, if they're continuing their care and custody, they would be in immediate danger, and that would be they would be continuously subjected to that. And so the department should be named as temporary managed conservator of the children. We don't have any objection to the placement with Mr. Zamora because he's the only person that has cooperated with the department and appears to have these children's best interests at heart. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Savage.
Yes, Your Honor, I feel the department has not met their burden. This is an ICWA case. It's a higher level of burden that they have to meet, clear and convincing. Under 25 U.S. Code 1912, they also have to have an expert witness testify in order to support the removal of ICWA children into foster care. We did not have that, so that does not meet the requirement. There's also a higher level of services that needs to be provided that was also not testified to, right? We had a bunch of caseworkers asking for drug tests, but that was absolutely it. No domestic violence classes were offered. No testimony of, oh, we provided this service for her to go to or to try to rectify the issues. There was no ask for a safety plan, nothing. We got a couple testimony from different caseworkers that they asked for a UA, mom denied it, and then they sought to seek removal. There's not enough that meets the burden of clear and convincing under ICWA. And again, it's a requirement to have an expert witness who is not a witness employed by the department testify that removal of the children would somehow pose an immediate danger to their health or physical safety. We do not have that here. I'd request that this removal be denied because it did not meet the obligation that the department is required to under the law.
Mr. Asari?
Yes, Your Honor, I agree with everything Ms. Savage has just said. And on behalf of my client, also asking for the removal to be denied. But just to kind of elaborate here, Although 2022 was a tough year for this family, we've heard testimony that throughout the year, everyone with the department who has seen the kids has indicated the kids were healthy. They're free. There were no signs of neglect, no signs of abuse. We've also heard testimony that the kids had always been enrolled in school, regardless of wherever they live. And Your Honor, we've also heard testimony that the two school age kids in this case are right on track as far as the grade they're supposed to be in. And then we fast forward to the move to Beeville, right when this family was able to see some great progress financially and getting a stable home. Right at that point, the department wants to come in and remove the kids. Right when they found an apartment that was suitable for the kids, that was a good apartment for the kids, an apartment where they were able to sign a full year lease, a long-term placement, and also at a time that the parents were able to find long-term employment. So, Your Honor, there just isn't a justification for removing the kids from the parents' care here. If the department sees that there's some need for intervention, which we don't believe there is any need for intervention, but if the department were to see if there was some need for intervention, this should really be a motion to participate in services at most. Your Honor, this is not a removal case. So I would ask that the department's request is denied.
Thank you, Mr. Asari. And Mr. Saldivar?
Your Honor, as far as my client's concerned and his child, there's no proof here that he is a danger to his child. You heard testimony through the department that he cooperated, he drug tested, it was negative, Judge. He has a safe and stable home that came directly from the worker in this case. So I'd be asking that his child be returned home immediately if the court decides to grant the temporary management conservatorship to the department. I'd ask that my client not work a service plan, Judge. I think he will cooperate with the department regarding visitation if need be, and he can provide a safe and stable home while this case is pending, Judge. But as far as his child's concerned, Judge, we're asking that she immediately be returned and be severed out if needed to dismiss his portion of the case regarding his child, Judge.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bunch. Your assessment as the attorney ad litem for these children?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I can just say, first of all, the children are doing fine in their current placement. Eliana is the oldest and the most vocal, most verbal. She likes where she's at now, but she would also like to be with her mother. And she has no issue with her father either that she's informed me of. As far as the case presented, I'm not completely convinced. The people with personal knowledge of this matter are either not being forthcoming or are not here. A lot of the testimony I did not find to be totally credible from a lot of different witnesses. And that kind of leaves me in a position where I have to say that I don't know. And I have to say that I'm not, I don't think there's clear and convincing evidence that the removal is justified. That's all, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bunch. Mr. Barrera, what would you like to add at this time on behalf of the children?
I've met with both the Mr. Zamora by herself, and I've met with Miss Anida by herself, and met with them both together. I think, that they deserve to get the children back. At first, I was concerned because Mrs. Anida is very aggressive, but I understand she's really protective of those kids. And when I visited Miss Salinas, where the kids are fostering, they look in perfect health and everything. And I don't believe, after visiting with Mr. Zamora and Miss Sanaida, that they would harm those kids at all. Matter of fact, they're so overprotective that they become very aggressive. And I understand that. I do the same thing with my kid. So in reality, I'm like all the other attorneys. I can see where CPS had their concerns, but to justify removing them when this thing happened 7, 8 months ago is kind of difficult to swallow. I feel that if you put them either back with Miss Zamora, Mr. Zamora, or Miss Anaya, they'll be well taken care of. I don't see them in danger. Both times all 3 times that I met with them, I never saw any drug use. I never saw anything. The only thing I noticed is one of them smoked a cigarette, outside, and they both have. Mrs. Zamora has a real nice apartment, when it's Mrs. Zamora, Mrs. Alvarado has a nice mobile home. It's not a mansion, but it is very adequate for the kids. They all have, fire alarms. They all have, extinguishers. They're very well suited for children. So for me to say that they should be removed, I would be lying. I think they need to be back with their mother. I know she's overprotective and very aggressive. I've seen that in the past. There was a case I had 4 or 5 years ago when we got them reunited and they got clean and everything. And I think, like one of the attorneys said, they would probably be willing to seek services, but with their children with him. So with them, either one. So I'm kind of split on this one. I think the children should be back with their mother, in all honesty. Because I never saw any drug use. I never saw any hazy eyes or any, smell like marijuana or beer or anything. So, Judge, I really feel for the mother and Mr. Zamora, that they want their children back.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Barrera. I appreciate that perspective, and thank you all for your time and your patience getting through these proceedings. Having heard the testimony today in conjunction with previous proceedings, the court is of the opinion that the department has not met its burden to justify the removal with the heightened standards that are required under ICWA. If this was a normal, ordinary removal under Texas law, and honestly, if we were just talking about Eliana, because she's not an Indian child and ICWA does not apply to her, I believe the department would have met its burden for a removal of these children, but it is not appropriate or fair or in her best interest to be removed separately from her siblings. I, at this time, do feel that this family, however, would benefit from services, and I do think that the facts that I've heard support a finding by this court that abuse or neglect has occurred, or that there is a substantial risk of abuse or neglect or continuing danger to the physical health or safety of the children caused by an act or failure to act of the person, parent, managing conservator, guardian, or other member of the child's household, and that services are necessary to ensure the physical health or safety of the children. So I am returning the children to their custodial parent in this situation, Ms. Alvarado, but I am ordering court-ordered services in this case. You will continue to be monitored by this court to address the concerns that are legitimate that the department has brought up. I'm ordering drug tests. And so I wasn't able until right now to order drug tests that you be submitted to randomly by the department and to engage in any treatment if those drug tests come back positive for any substance. I am including an order for a hair test at this time. In addition, I am ordering that the parties engage in individual therapy and domestic violence prevention. And I believe that those services are narrowly tailored to address the concerns that have been brought up during testimony. And I want to also order that the children themselves be continuously enrolled in school, that we see stability in the placement where they are with Ms. Alvarado, and that the department have access to them in the home and the school, including Mr. Barrera and Mr. Bunch. And I hope that this will be a short-lived court-ordered services case. If there is nothing to be concerned about, we should find that out through your participation in services. I think this is the approach that is in the best interest of these children. And I find that today based on as I said, the testimony today and at previous hearings. So I would like to come back for a compliance hearing.
Your Honor, I would request fingernails, possibly.
I
Changed.
Yeah, I can, we'll stick with the UAs and the hair test for now. It looks like each of the parties should have enough hair to submit to one. And I'm going to ask that you do that within the next 48 hours. I think the department should be able to set that up and have that in place. I am at this time finding that Mr. Alvarado is not an individual who has subjected his child or any children to any continuing danger. And I don't believe services are necessary. So I am dismissing him from the suit. And Mr. Saldivar, you as well, for your representation. I don't believe his ongoing participation is necessary. All other court-ordered relationships would remain in effect during the court-ordered services case. April 25th at 11, we'll come back to see where we are with the services that I've just ordered. Is there anything further to address at this time?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
No,
All right.
Counsel.
Thank you. If there's